The night was heavy with storm. Rain poured down from the sky as if the heavens had opened their gates, and the sound of thunder rolled across the valley like the beat of distant war drums. The forest outside Ethan's cabin was alive with the roar of wind and the cracking of branches. His small wooden home trembled with every gust, but he was used to such nights. Ethan sat near the fire, a book resting open on his lap. The flames painted his face in shades of gold and shadow, a lonely glow against the endless black storm outside. He lived far from town, away from people, away from noise. Solitude had become his companion, though sometimes the silence weighed heavy on him. But that night, silence did not last. Through the pounding rain, a sound reached him, something faint yet unusual. At first he thought it was just a fallen branch dragged by the wind. But then came another sound. A sharp cry, almost human, almost not. Ethan's heart skipped. He set the book aside, stood up, and listened carefully. There it was again, a weak, broken voice carried by the storm. Without hesitation, he grabbed his coat, pulled open the cabin door, and stepped out into the rain. Water hit him like icy needles, soaking him instantly. His boots sank into the mud as he hurried toward the trees, guided only by instinct and that fragile sound. And then he saw her. At the edge of the clearing, under the faint flash of lightning, a figure staggered between the trees. She was small, her body trembling, her legs giving way beneath her. When she fell, Ethan ran forward, his breath sharp in his chest. She was not human. Her skin shimmered faintly as if touched by starlight, glowing in soft hues of silver and blue. Strange markings traced across her arms and neck, glowing brighter whenever lightning split the sky. Her eyes, large and luminous, were filled with fear. Her clothes were torn, soaked through with rain clinging to her fragile frame. For a moment, Ethan froze. The stories he had read, the rumors about lights in the sky, could they have been true? He looked down at her shivering form, her lips whispering words he could not understand. She was alive, but barely. Ethan's mind screamed caution. This was no ordinary traveler, no lost girl from town. She was something else, something not of this world. But his heart overpowered his fear. She was hurt. She was alone. And she was dying in the storm. Without another thought, Ethan lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her warmth strange against his chest, almost like fire yet fragile as ice. She gasped weakly, her head falling against his shoulder. "I've got you," Ethan whispered, though he knew she couldn't understand. "You'll be safe now." The rain whipped against his face as he hurried back to the cabin, holding her tightly. The storm seemed endless, but inside his arms was a life depending on him. He kicked the cabin door open with his boot, carried her inside, and shut the storm away. The cabin was warm compared to the freezing night, but the girl still shivered violently. Ethan laid her gently near the fire, stripping away the wet blanket that clung to her. He fetched another, thick woolen, smelling faintly of cedar, and wrapped it around her small body. Her breathing was ragged, shallow, as though every breath was a fight. Ethan quickly set water to boil, his hands moving with urgency. He poured warm water into a cup and tried to help her drink, but she barely managed to swallow. Her glowing eyes flickered half-closed, watching him with confusion and something like fear. "Easy," Ethan murmured, kneeling beside her. "You're safe now. Just rest." He didn't know what else to do. He wasn't a doctor, and he didn't even know what she was. But he knew kindness, and he knew how to protect. That was all he could offer. For hours, Ethan sat beside her as the storm raged outside. The firelight flickered across her strange markings, making them appear alive. Sometimes they dimmed. Sometimes they flared as if reacting to her breath. He wanted to ask her who she was, where she came from, what had brought her to his door. But she was too weak to speak, and he would not press her. Instead, he simply stayed. He replaced the damp cloth on her forehead. He whispered soft words even if she didn't understand. And slowly her trembling eased. Her breaths grew steadier. Her eyes finally closed, not in fear but in exhausted sleep. Only then did Ethan let out the breath he had been holding. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling as the storm continued its endless assault. What had he just done? Who was she? He didn't know, but he knew this. If he hadn't stepped outside, if he hadn't heard her cry, she would be gone. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he felt that fate had placed her on his doorstep for a reason. Ethan looked at the sleeping girl by the fire, wrapped in his blanket, her strange glow faint but steady. Something stirred in his chest, something more than curiosity. something deeper than fear. It was the beginning of a bond neither of them yet understood. And so the night went on, with a storm outside and a secret inside, hidden in the heart of a man who had chosen compassion over caution. The stranger had found shelter, and Ethan's life would never be the same again. Morning came slowly after the storm. The forest was heavy with silence, the air still carrying the scent of rain. Drops of water clung to every branch and leaf, catching the sunlight like tiny crystals. For Ethan, the world felt different. He woke not only to the sound of birds but to the quiet presence of someone else in his cabin. The girl was still asleep, lying near the fire wrapped in blankets. Her breathing was steady now, no longer broken and weak as it had been the night before. Her strange glowing markings had faded to a softer light, like faint traces of silver ink across her skin. For the first time she looked peaceful. Ethan crouched beside her, studying her features. She looked young, not a child, but not much older than himself. Her face was delicate, her eyes closed in rest, her lips curved slightly as if caught between dream and memory. He wondered again who she was, where she had come from, and why fate had placed her in his care. He made breakfast quietly, bread warmed on the fire, some dried fruit, and a bit of tea. When the smell filled the room, the girl stirred. Slowly her eyes opened, revealing the same strange light he had seen last night. Her gaze flicked across the cabin, cautious, unsure, until it landed on him. Ethan smiled softly. "Morning," she blinked, confusion in her expression. She didn't seem to understand. He pointed to himself. "Ethan," he spoke slowly, clearly. Then he pointed at her, tilting his head, waiting. For a moment she hesitated. Her lips moved, shaky, before she whispered a word, broken but strong enough to carry. "Lyra." The name was soft, melodic, and carried an echo of something not human. Ethan repeated it gently. "Lyra." Her eyes widened slightly, as if surprised he could shape her name. For the first time her lips curved into a small, uncertain smile. That smile struck Ethan more deeply than he expected. Days passed, and the cabin slowly filled with something it hadn't known in years. Company. Lyra stayed close to the fire at first, still weak, her body needing time to recover. Ethan brought her food and water, making sure she ate even when she shook her head in confusion. Slowly she learned his words, pointing at objects with her long, delicate fingers. "Fire," he said, tapping the flames. "Fire," she repeated carefully, her accent strange but beautiful. "Bread." "Id." Each word was a step, a fragile bridge between their worlds. Sometimes she laughed softly at her own mistakes, and sometimes she grew frustrated, her markings glowing brighter with emotion. Ethan never lost patience. He had no one else to speak to, and now every moment with her felt meaningful. At night, when the forest fell quiet, Ethan would hear her whispering in her own language. The words flowed like a song, soft and trembling. Sometimes her voice cracked, and he knew she was remembering pain. He didn't ask what memories haunted her. Instead, he simply sat nearby, letting her know she wasn't alone. One evening, when the fire burned low, Lyra surprised him. She reached out, her hand touching his wrist lightly. Her glowing eyes met his, and in broken English she whispered, "Safe. Here." Ethan swallowed hard. He nodded, his voice rough. "Yes, you're safe here." It was a small moment, but it carried the weight of trust. As the days stretched into weeks, Lyra grew stronger. She began helping with small tasks around the cabin. Her hands, though delicate, learned quickly. She carried wood inside, stirred the pot over the fire, and even tried to sweep the floor with clumsy determination. Ethan often found himself smiling at her efforts. One afternoon he showed her how to chop wood. He swung the axe into the log with a solid crack, the pieces falling neatly to the side. Lyra watched closely, her head tilted, eyes sharp with curiosity. Then she pointed at the axe, gesturing for him to give it to her. "You want to try?" Ethan asked, raising a brow. She nodded firmly. At first he hesitated, afraid she might hurt herself. But her gaze was steady, insistent. So he handed her the axe carefully. She gripped it awkwardly, her hands too small for the heavy handle. When she swung, the blade missed the center of the log, barely cutting it. She frowned, glowing markings brightening in frustration. Ethan chuckled. "Not bad for the first try. Here, like this." He stepped behind her, guiding her hands, showing her how to steady her stance. Together they swung the axe, and this time the wood split cleanly. Lyra's face lit up, her smile wide and pure. She laughed, a sound like music, and Ethan found himself laughing with her. In that moment, the cabin didn't feel lonely anymore. Yet not everything was light. Some nights Lyra woke with a scream, her body shaking, her eyes glowing fiercely. She spoke words he couldn't understand, her voice broken with fear. Ethan would rush to her side, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. Shh, it's okay. You're safe. It's just a dream. Slowly, her breathing would calm, and she would cling to his hand as if it were her anchor. She never explained what she saw in those dreams. Ethan didn't push. He knew enough from the pain in her eyes that she had lost something. Maybe someone. It only made him more determined to protect her. One morning, after the forest had thawed from frost, Ethan found her standing by the window. She was watching the sunlight pour through the trees, her face calm, her markings glowing softly in the light. When he approached, she turned to him, her voice hesitant, but clear enough to understand. Ethan, why help me? The question caught him off guard. He paused, searching for the right words. Because you needed help, he said simply. Because no one deserves to be left alone in the storm. Her eyes softened and she whispered his name again, almost like it was sacred. Ethan, he smiled. Yes, Lyra? She shook her head, smiling faintly. Good. It was such a simple word, but he felt the warmth behind it. And so the cabin became more than wood and stone. It became a home of peace, two souls from different worlds, finding comfort in shared silence, shared laughter, and the quiet promise that neither would be alone again. The days rolled by like quiet ripples across a lake. Ethan no longer counted the weeks since the storm, for time seemed to soften inside the cabin. Where once he had only silence for company, now there was laughter, gentle voices, and the sound of two people learning to live together. Lyra was no longer weak. Her steps were steady, her hands sure. She moved about the cabin as if she belonged there, folding blankets, tending the fire, humming strange melodies in her language. The songs had no words Ethan could understand, but their tone carried feelings, longing, sorrow, and sometimes hope. Ethan listened every time, drawn to the sound. It reminded him that she was not human, not of this earth, and yet, in her laughter, her tears, her curiosity, she was not so different from him. One evening, while the sun was falling behind the trees, Ethan sat carving wood with his knife. It was a habit he had learned as a boy, shaping scraps of timber into small figures. He worked quietly, focused, until he noticed Lyra standing near him. Her eyes sparkled with interest as she leaned close to watch. Ethan smiled, lifting the figure he had been carving, a small bird with wings spread wide. Bird, he said, showing her. Lyra touched the wooden shape gently, repeating after him. Bird, Ethan nodded. Yes, bird. Her smile brightened, and she tapped his hand, pointing back to the block of wood. She wanted him to carve another. Amused, Ethan began shaping a new figure, but before he could finish, he felt her hand brush against his. It was a small touch, soft, almost accidental. Yet he noticed how she didn't move away. Instead, her fingers lingered, tracing the lines of his hand as if memorizing them. When he looked up, he found her eyes fixed on him, glowing faintly, warm and intense. Ethan's breath caught in his chest. He wasn't sure what that look meant, but it stirred something inside him, something he couldn't quite explain. Strange moments like that began to happen more often. At night, when the fire burned low, Lyra sometimes sat closer than before, her shoulder brushing his. Her glowing markings pulsed softly whenever their skin touched, as though responding to him. Ethan noticed, but he didn't say anything. He told himself it was just her way of seeking comfort. After all, she had lost her people, her ship, her world. Maybe she only wanted closeness, a reminder she was not alone, but a part of him wondered if it was something more. Then came the first time he noticed the heat. It was a cold evening, frost clinging to the windows, the kind of night when even the fire could not chase away the chill. Ethan wrapped himself in a blanket, but when Lyra sat beside him, he felt a strange warmth radiating from her body. She didn't seem to notice, but her skin glowed brighter than usual, her breaths slow and heavy. Ethan shifted slightly, uncertain, yet the warmth that spread from her made the cold vanish. When he glanced at her, he found her watching him. Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but she looked away, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. Ethan felt his chest tighten. There was something happening, something he didn't understand. The next day, Lyra worked in the small garden behind the cabin. She crouched in the soil, pulling weeds with careful hands. Ethan chopped wood nearby, the steady thud of the axe filling the air. At one point, Lyra paused, wiping her forehead. The sunlight caught her skin, making her markings glow so brightly that Ethan stopped mid-swing. She looked radiant, almost otherworldly, as if she carried the sun inside her. When she noticed his gaze, she blushed. Or at least, he thought she did. The silver glow on her cheeks deepened and she quickly turned away, her hands moving faster in the soil. Ethan chuckled softly, though his heart beat faster. He didn't know what she was hiding, but he knew this. Something inside her was changing. That night, the change became harder to ignore. Ethan was half asleep when he heard a soft sound, Lyra whispering. He opened his eyes to find her standing near the fire, her hands clenched, her body trembling. "Lyra?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep. She turned, her glowing eyes filled with something he couldn't name. Fear, longing, desperation. Her skin radiated warmth, her markings burning bright like living fire. Not control," she whispered in broken English, shaking her head. Ethan sat up quickly, concern flooding him. "What's wrong? Are you sick?" She pressed a hand to her chest, her breath ragged. "Not sick. Season?" The word hung heavy in the air, strange and foreign to Ethan. He frowned, stepping closer. "Season?" Her eyes brimmed with tears. "My people, body, change, need, bond." Ethan froze, the meaning sinking slowly into him. She wasn't just glowing, wasn't just warm. Her body was entering something natural for her kind, something he had no way of understanding fully. But he saw her pain, her trembling. She was fighting against something she couldn't control, and his heart ached for her. The next morning, the air between them was different. Lyra stayed quiet, avoiding his gaze, her face hidden behind her hair. She barely ate, barely spoke, only sat near the window, staring at the forest as if lost in thought. Ethan wanted to ask, to understand, but he didn't want to push her. Instead, he kept close, chopping wood, preparing food, keeping the cabin warm, small ways of telling her she wasn't alone. Yet he couldn't shake the memory of her trembling voice. Season, need bond. The words echoed in his mind, raising questions he wasn't ready to face. But even in the silence, one truth was clear. Something was changing between them. It was no longer just a bond of survival or kindness. It was something deeper, stronger, something that pulled them together in ways neither could explain. Ethan felt it every time her hand brushed his, every time her glowing eyes lingered too long. And Lyra felt it too, though fear made her hide it. They were standing at the edge of something they didn't yet understand, and soon, neither of them would be able to ignore it. The forest was restless that night. A storm gathered again, though smaller than the one that had first brought Lyra into Ethan's life. The wind rattled the windows, rain tapped against the roof, and the fire flickered low inside the cabin. Ethan had grown used to the rhythm of storms, but this night felt different. Lyra sat near the fire, her knees pulled up to her chest, her arms wrapped tightly around them. Her glowing eyes reflected the flames, but her face was pale. Her lips pressed together as if she fought against some invisible weight. Ethan noticed. He always noticed. "You're quiet tonight," he said gently, setting down the mug of tea he had been drinking. Lyra did not answer. Her hands trembled against the blanket and her breath came in shallow gasps. She looked fragile, almost breaking. Ethan's chest tightened. He moved closer, kneeling beside her. "Lyra," he whispered. "What's wrong?" She turned her head toward him slowly. Her eyes burned brighter, filled with emotion he couldn't name. Then in a trembling voice she spoke. "It hurts," Ethan froze. "Hurts where?" Her hand pressed against her chest, her fingers clutching the fabric of the blanket. "Inside. Cannot stop, body. Burning." Her markings flared like fire, glowing brighter than he had ever seen. Sweat beaded on her forehead, her lips trembling. She shook her head violently as though fighting something within. "Not sick," she whispered through clenched teeth. "Season come. Too strong." The word again. Season. Ethan's heart pounded. He remembered the night she had said it before, how desperate she had sounded. Now he understood. Whatever was happening to her, it was not an illness but something natural, something her kind endured. "Lyra," he said softly, fear and compassion twisting inside him. "What does it mean? Tell me." Tears filled her eyes. She looked at him as though ashamed, as though confessing a secret too heavy to bear. "My people, in season body call for bond. If no bond," her voice broke. She shook her head. "Pain will break me." Ethan felt his breath catch. He sat back slightly, stunned by the truth. She wasn't asking for medicine or safety. She was asking for something far deeper, something instinctive and primal to her kind. He didn't know what to say. His thoughts tangled, fear, doubt, guilt, and yet beneath it all a fierce ache for her suffering. "Lyra," he whispered, his voice rough. "I didn't know. I thought you were just adjusting to Earth." She closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Tried to fight. Wanted not to burden you, but now cannot." Her body shook violently. Ethan's hand reached out without thought, steadying her shoulder. The heat radiating from her was startling, almost burning. She gasped at his touch, her glowing eyes snapping open, locking onto his. For a moment neither moved. The storm outside raged, but inside the world narrowed to the space between them. Ethan's mind was a battlefield. Part of him screamed to step back, to give her distance, to find another way. But another part, the part that had carried her through the storm, that had watched her laugh over chopped wood, that had held her hand when nightmares came, could not look away. He saw her pain, her desperation, the way her body trembled as she fought something beyond her control. She was strong, so much stronger than him in many ways, but here she was breaking, and only he stood between her and despair. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice raw, pleading. "Help me." The words cut through him like a blade. He swallowed hard, his hand tightening gently on her shoulder. "Lyra, listen to me. You're not a burden. You never were." Her breath hitched, her tears glowing faintly in the firelight. "I don't know what this means for your people," he continued softly, "but I know what it means for me. It means you're hurting, and I can't stand to see that." Her eyes widened, her markings flaring. "You would stay? With me?" Ethan nodded slowly. "I will stay. I'll do whatever it takes to help you through this." Her lip trembled, and then, for the first time that night, a small, broken smile touched her face. She reached out with a shaking hand, her fingers brushing his cheek. "Strong. Kind," she whispered. "Not afraid." Ethan caught her hand gently, pressing it to his face. "I am afraid," he admitted, his voice low. "But not of you." The storm outside reached its peak, thunder shaking the cabin, lightning painting the room in harsh flashes. But within, another storm calmed. Lyra's trembling lessened as she leaned into Ethan, her head resting against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, feeling the heat of her body seep into his bones. She sighed, a sound of relief, as though the fight within her had eased just by being in his embrace. Ethan closed his eyes, listening to her breathing, steadying his own. He didn't fully understand what lay ahead. He didn't know the rules of her world, the cost of this bond she spoke of. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not abandon her. She had come to him broken and afraid, and he had given her shelter. Now she needed more, and he would give that too. Because somewhere along the way, she had become more than a guest, more than a stranger. She had become his. The night stretched on, long and heavy, but Ethan stayed awake, cradling her as the storm passed. Lyra's markings dimmed gradually, her breathing evened, and her trembling stopped. When she finally spoke again, her voice was soft, filled with quiet wonder. "Bond begins." Ethan looked down at her glowing eyes, his own heart steady with unspoken resolve. "Then we'll face it together." Outside, the storm began to fade, leaving the forest in silence once more. Inside, in the glow of the fire, two souls had crossed a line they could never return from. The breaking point had come, and instead of shattering, they had chosen each other. The storm had passed, but its weight still lingered inside the cabin. The fire burned low, casting a soft glow across the wooden walls. Outside, the forest dripped with the remnants of rain, every branch heavy with silver drops. Ethan sat with Lyra in his arms. Her breathing had calmed, her body no longer trembling like before. She leaned against him, her head resting on his chest, her glowing eyes half closed in exhaustion. The storm had not only shaken the earth, it had shaken their hearts. Ethan knew now what Lyra's people called the season. He understood, at least in part, what it demanded of her. And the truth weighed heavily on him. This wasn't something he had ever imagined facing. He had taken her in to protect her, to give her warmth and shelter, never expecting that one day her life might depend on something far more intimate. Yet here he was, holding her, feeling the heat of her skin, the quiet desperation in her voice when she whispered, "Help me." For a long time, Ethan sat in silence, his hand brushing gently through her silken hair. His mind wrestled with questions. Could he give her what she needed? Could he step into something that was not only human love, but something alien? Something bound by instincts he barely understood? He thought of the nights she had smiled at him over bread, the mornings she had struggled to learn new words, the times she had laughed when he showed her how to split wood or carve figures. He thought of the tears in her eyes when she whispered "safe here," and he realized something. He already cared for her, not as a burden, not as someone to protect out of duty, but as someone who had slowly become part of his life, his world, his heart. The choice wasn't only about saving her, it was about admitting what he already felt. "Lyra," he said softly, his voice steady though his heart raced. She stirred, lifting her glowing eyes to meet his. "Ethan," he cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away the traces of tears. "I don't know much about your people. I don't understand everything about this season. But I do understand you, and I won't let you suffer." Her lips parted, trembling. "You would give bond?" "Yes," Ethan whispered, his chest tightening. "If that's what you need. If that's what saves you, then yes." Her breath caught, a small sob escaping her. But this time her tears were not of pain. They were of relief. "You choose me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I already did," Ethan said, a faint smile touching his lips. "The night I carried you in from the storm, I chose you." The words seemed to reach deep into her. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his, her markings glowing softly between them. He felt the heat of her skin, the warmth of her breath, and the trembling of her body easing as if his words alone had lifted a weight from her soul. "Strong, kind, mine," she whispered in broken English. Ethan closed his eyes, holding her tighter. "Yours," he said simply. That night was not about passion, it was about trust. Lyra's body burned with instinct, but she did not rush. Instead, she leaned into him gently, allowing him to hold her, to steady her, to be her anchor. Ethan did not push, did not demand. He only gave what she needed most: comfort, closeness, the steady presence of someone who refused to leave. When her trembling returned, he whispered softly to calm her. When tears fell again, he brushed them away. His touch was careful, gentle, reminding her that she was safe. The bond was not something either of them fully understood, but it grew that night, not as a command of instinct alone, but as a choice made in the heart. And for the first time since her season began, Lyra slept without fear. The next morning, Ethan awoke with her still in his arms. The fire had burned low, leaving only embers, but the cabin was filled with a quiet warmth. Lyra stirred slowly, her glowing eyes opening to meet his. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice soft, almost shy. "Good morning," he replied with a small smile. She touched his hand lightly, her fingers curling around his. "Pain. Less now, Bond. Help." He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm glad." Her gaze lingered on him, searching his face. "You human. Not same as me. But heart? Same?" Ethan chuckled softly. "Maybe our hearts aren't so different." Her lips curved into a faint smile, and she leaned her head against his shoulder once more. In the days that followed, their bond deepened. Lyra's glow softened, no longer wild and burning, but steady and gentle. Her laughter returned lighter than before, and the pain in her eyes faded. But something had changed between them. Where once there had been only kindness, now there was closeness. Where once there had been only safety, now there was belonging. Every glance carried more weight, every touch lingered longer. Ethan found himself reaching for her hand without thinking, and she held on to it as if it were her lifeline. The cabin no longer felt like his, it felt like theirs. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset bleed across the sky, Lyra turned to him suddenly. Her voice was firmer now, her words clearer than before. "My people say bond is forever, not season only. You know? Ethan looked at her, his heart steady. Forever sounds good to me. She blinked, as if surprised by his ease, then laughed softly, shaking her head. You human heart brave, he smiled. Maybe it just knows what it wants. Her hand found his again, squeezing gently. And what it wants is me? Ethan met her glowing eyes without hesitation. Yes, it's always been you. The choice had been made, not because of instinct, not because of need, but because two souls from different worlds had found each other in the storm and refused to let go. Lyra's season had tested them, pushing them to the edge. But Ethan's decision to stay, to help, to love, had turned the breaking point into a beginning. And together, they stepped forward not as man and alien, but as something stronger, a bond chosen freely, a promise unspoken yet undeniable. The forest had turned green again. Days passed in gentle peace, the storm only a memory. The cabin, once a place of silence, now carried the warmth of two voices, two lives joined together. Ethan and Lyra lived as if the world outside did not matter. They shared the little things, meals cooked slowly over the fire, laughter over simple mistakes, quiet evenings watching the sunset sink behind the trees. Yet under those small moments, something deeper had formed. Their bond. It was not invisible. Ethan could feel it every time Lyra touched his hand, every time her glowing eyes searched for him as if to make sure he was still there. And she could feel it too. Every time his heart beat steady against her, every time he smiled at her with a gentleness she had never known before. The season had brought them together. But now, it was love that held them close. One morning, Ethan woke to find Lyra standing outside the cabin, her face turned toward the rising sun. Her markings glowed faintly in the light, and her hair shone like threads of silver. She looked almost otherworldly, yet so peaceful. He stepped to her side. Couldn't sleep? She smiled softly. Sleep, good. But heart wake, feel you. Ethan tilted his head. You felt me? She nodded, pressing her hand over her chest. Bond makes strong thread. When you near, I know. When far, I feel pull. He thought for a moment, a smile tugging at his lips. So I can't ever sneak away? She giggled, a sound like soft bells. No, you mine. Forever thread. Her words were simple, but they touched him more than poetry. He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. Then I won't ever go far. Yet even in this new closeness, challenges rose. Lyra's world was not Ethan's. She still struggled with words, sometimes mixing them in ways that made him laugh, though she never meant to be funny. Her customs were strange. She bowed when thanking him. She refused to eat certain foods, and sometimes she stayed awake at night, humming songs in a language he did not understand. One evening, as Ethan cooked a pot of stew, Lyra watched him carefully. Her glowing eyes were fixed on the bubbling pot. You always fire food, she said. He chuckled. Humans cook food before eating. Why? She asked, tilting her head. He raised a brow. Why? Because it makes it taste better and safer. She blinked, then plucked a raw carrot from the table and bit into it with ease. Safe, she said with a grin, chewing happily. Ethan laughed, shaking his head. I guess you win that one. Their differences were many, but instead of pulling them apart, those differences filled their days with discovery. Each mistake was followed by laughter. Each question became a bridge between their worlds. Still, there were moments of wait one night. As the fire dimmed low, Lyra sat curled against him, quiet and thoughtful. Ethan, she whispered. Yes? She hesitated, her voice trembling. Your people, if they see me, they hate? The question cut deep. Ethan held her tighter. Some might not understand. Some might be afraid. But not all. Not me. Her eyes glowed faintly with sadness. My people hide. Fear human, fear war. If they know I bond, they say wrong. Ethan stroked her hair gently. Lyra, I don't care what they say. I care about you. That's all? She lifted her head, her eyes shimmering. You always choose me? Always, he said firmly. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they fell with a smile. She pressed her forehead against his, whispering, Then I strong. With you, I strong. Days became weeks. Together they built a rhythm. Ethan showed her how to fish by the river, laughing as she fell in, trying to catch them with her bare hands. She taught him strange words in her language, words that carried not only sound but also feeling, each one glowing softly when she spoke them. One evening, while they sat beneath the stars, She taught him one word in particular. Arvenka, she whispered, her glowing finger tracing the word in the air. What does it mean? Ethan asked. She leaned close, her voice tender. It means home of heart, he smiled, his chest warming. Then, you're my Arvenka. Her eyes shone brighter, and she pulled him into an embrace that needed no translation. But even in their peace, Ethan felt the shadow of reality. How long could they hide here in the cabin, away from the world? What would happen if humans discovered her? What if her people came looking? Sometimes he saw Lyra staring into the trees with a distant look, as if expecting someone to appear. He didn't ask, but he knew. She feared being taken away. One night, as rain tapped softly on the roof, Ethan spoke the thought that had been growing in him. Lyra, he said, his voice firm. She turned to him, her glowing eyes searching. Yes? If anyone ever tries to take you away from me, I'll fight for you. No matter who it is, her lips trembled. Even if many come? Even if the whole galaxy comes, he said. Her breath hitched and she pressed her face against his chest, clutching him tightly. You crazy human, she whispered. Maybe, he said softly, kissing the top of her head. But I'm yours. The bond had changed everything. Ethan no longer thought of his cabin as just a shelter in the woods. It had become the center of a life he never imagined he'd have. Each day with Lyra was proof that love didn't need to be from the same world, the same blood, or the same stars. It only needed two hearts willing to stay, to choose each other again and again. And as he watched her laugh by the fire, her markings glowing softly in the light, Ethan realized something. The world might never understand, but he didn't need the world. He only needed her. The forest was quiet that evening. Too quiet. Ethan noticed it first while chopping wood outside the cabin. Normally the trees echoed with birdsong, the chatter of small animals, the whisper of leaves. But now, silence pressed down heavy. He straightened, sweat dripping down his brow, and scanned the tree line. His gut twisted. Something was wrong. Inside, Lyra was humming softly as she prepared herbs by the fire. Her glow filled the cabin with a gentle warmth, unaware of the shadow drawing near. Then Ethan heard it. Low humming, not of nature, but of engines. The sound grew louder, vibrating through the ground. His heart raced. They had found her. Lyra. Ethan rushed inside, his voice sharp. She looked up, startled by the fear in his eyes. Ethan, what? No time, he cut in, grabbing her hand. Someone's here, I think. Your people. Her face paled, her markings dimming with sudden dread. No, they come to take me. Her voice broke, trembling. If they take me, bond breaks, heart dies. Ethan's grip tightened. Then they'll have to go through me first. The humming grew louder until lights pierced through the trees. A ship descended, sleek and silver, unlike anything the human world had built. Its engines blew wind across the clearing, bending branches and scattering leaves. The hatch opened, and tall figures stepped out, Lyra's kind. Their skin shimmered faintly, their glowing markings brighter than hers. Armor wrapped their bodies and strange weapons gleamed in their hands. One of them, taller than the rest, stepped forward. His voice was deep, commanding, and carried the weight of authority. Lyra of the Vaerin, he said, your season has ended. You must return. The bond you made with the human is forbidden. Lyra's body shook. She gripped Ethan's arm tightly, her glowing eyes wide with fear. Ethan, she whispered, pleading. Ethan stepped in front of her, his jaw set. She stays with me. The alien leader's eyes narrowed. You are human. You do not understand. The bond between species is dangerous. It must be broken. Ethan's voice hardened. The only dangerous thing here is trying to tear us apart. The soldiers raised their weapons, a glow building at the tips. Lyra gasped, clutching Ethan's hand. They kill you. Ethan turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting hers. Then they'll have to try. He pushed her gently behind him, his body tense. His mind screamed at the impossibility of fighting such beings, but his heart knew only one truth. He would not surrender her. Listen to me, Ethan said firmly, his voice carrying through the clearing. She's not just yours. She's not just mine. She chose me and I chose her. If you believe in bonds at all, then you know this is real. The leader's gaze flickered, but his voice remained cold. Choice does not matter. Law does. Ethan clenched his fists. Then your law is broken. The tension cracked like thunder. One soldier stepped forward, weapon humming. But Lyra suddenly moved, her markings blazing bright. She stepped beside Ethan, her voice fierce though her body trembled. "No," she cried. "Bond true. Heart true. If you take me, I die. If you kill him, I die. You cannot break what spirit made." Her glow flared stronger, so bright the clearing lit up like dawn. The soldiers hesitated, shielding their eyes. The leader's expression hardened. "Lyra!" But Ethan seized the moment. "Look at her. She's not weak. She's not broken. She's stronger because of our bond. And if you truly care for her, for your kind, you'd see that." His voice shook with emotion, but every word was iron. "You want to take her? Then take me too, because I won't let go." Silence fell heavy. The only sound was the soft hum of the ship. The leader studied Ethan with sharp, glowing eyes. For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly he lowered his weapon. "Human," he said, almost with wonder. "You carry the bond as if born to it. Your heart speaks truth." The other soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, uncertain. The leader finally turned his gaze to Lyra. "Your season was meant to find strength. You found it in him." Lyra's breath caught. "Then you let me stay?" The leader's eyes softened just enough. "Your path is your own. But remember, Lyra of the Vaerin, the bond you carry will change both your fates forever." With that, he raised his hand. The soldiers stepped back into the ship. Engines roared, light flared, and in moments the ship lifted, vanishing into the night sky. The clearing fell silent again. Only the sound of the forest returned, the rustle of leaves, the call of distant owls. Ethan's shoulders sagged, exhaustion washing over him. He turned to Lyra, who stared up at him with glowing eyes filled with tears. "You fought for me," she whispered, her voice breaking. He touched her face gently. "I told you. I'd fight the whole galaxy for you." Her tears spilled freely, and she threw her arms around him, holding him tight as if never to let go. "Mine," she whispered fiercely. "Forever mine." Ethan smiled, holding her just as tightly. "And I'm yours. Forever." That night, as they sat by the fire in their cabin, the world felt both bigger and smaller at once. Bigger, because now they knew others were watching, judging. Smaller, because inside their little home none of it mattered. Lyra curled against him, her glow soft and warm. Her season had ended, but their bond remained, stronger than ever, tested and proven. "Ethan," she whispered sleepily, her voice tender. "Yes? When I first come here, I think I die. But you give me life. You give me Arvenka." He smiled, his chest tightening with emotion. "And you gave me something I didn't even know I was missing. A reason to fight, a reason to love." Her eyes closed and she whispered one last word before sleep claimed her. "Together." Ethan kissed her forehead softly. Together. And as the fire burned low, he knew with unshakable certainty, whatever storms came, whatever world stood against them, they would face it side by side. Because their bond was not just instinct. It was choice. It was love, and love was stronger than any law of stars.